for coming to Careers Unfiltered. Today, we are going to talk about future-proofing your career. We're going to talk about the pace of change that we are seeing in careers today. We're going to look at some adaptability, how that works and fits for you, and hopefully touch into a couple examples.
Sounds good. So what are some of the biggest changes we're seeing in the job market right now? It seems like it's just rapid fire, right? I mean, a big one seems to be AI.
Definitely. Yeah, it is such a crazy job market right now. I think the biggest, probably honestly, that biggest change that we're seeing is the impact of AI. How is it affecting the scope of their role? How is that being changed? How quickly are employees being expected to suddenly be the AI experts in what they're doing? And even from understanding, I think, how is an organization working overall with those AI tools, from, how are you writing your performance review? Well, make sure you're, using your AI Copilot or Gem to write it, to how are you creating content in a marketing role, to if you're in a tech role, how are you using it for creating script and all that kind of stuff. It just seems at every little aspect, which then also turns into, oh, well, maybe we don't need a person to be doing this job anymore. We can supplement that with AI. So then for the job seeker, how does their job search change when the role that they're looking for maybe isn't really being offered in the same kind of way,
Right.
or suddenly is like 3 roles in one, because they're like, well, now that you could be so efficient with AI,
Yeah.
you get to do this, and this job.
Yay. Just what people need. More work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally overwhelming for a lot of people, and I can understand why.
Mm-hmm.
With these organizations, it seems like right now we're in this very interesting place where they're kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it'll stick, right? A lot of organizations, they're just jumping on the bandwagon. They want to implement AI left, right, and center, infuse it into every process as much as they can. And a lot of the people that are trying to do this, they're not sure how to make it meaningful. And I think that's the biggest thing that some organizations are going to see some maybe pushback in the future from, is when they've implemented this AI, but they didn't really think strategically about how to do it in a way that would meaningfully impact the people and the customers that are involved in some way, that touch this in some way. And so I think there's going to be some potentially some corrections happening in the future, because I think they're going to realize that you can't just cut all these roles and expect AI to pick up all the slack and still have a happy customer base and a happy, workforce. That's going to tank morale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also going to tank customer perception. Like, there's so many reports coming out now from different telecommunications companies and other anything that has like customer support, where they're trying to offload it all to AI. I mean, if you've ever experienced that, it can be extremely frustrating, because you just want to get an answer. It's a simple change you need to make, and you're just constantly being like rerouted through different AI bots. And there needs to be a stepping back and a real examination of, okay, if we're going to implement AI, how are we going to do it in a way that makes sense and isn't going to make the jobs more complicated or the processes more complicated?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you raise a really valid point right now, is that people are fearful of their jobs becoming obsolete. And so although I'm hoping for a correction, the reality is right now that a lot of these organizations, they're gunning for AI, and they're looking at headcount, and they're looking at ways to gain efficiencies and save money. And unfortunately, the way that they're going to save some of that money is by downsizing different teams and getting rid of certain roles. And so let's talk about how people can navigate that right now, so that hopefully they're seen as valuable and the ones that are going to be kept on the team to keep things running.
Exactly, right? I think it's the understanding then what AI can do in your role and what it can't do, right? So like really lean into the things that it can do for you. So take the time to learn about those things. So whether it's, doing LinkedIn learning classes, or I think Google actually released a whole training suite around AI and AI tools, right? So like dive into those things and understand how can you boost your productivity? How can you boost the even like the level and the polish of your work with those AI tools? And then thinking about like, well, what are the things that AI cannot do for me? And focus on those areas as well, right? So then you
Right.
like maybe like if you think about I'll take like maybe a social media manager at this point, right? When you think about that role, there's going to be all there. Of course, there is already all kinds of tools that that person had for their job. But now, um, how much can automations can be done, or even like from a reporting standpoint, right? Where they can take all of those reports from their work, and instead of having to spend hours to be like, okay, now I have to take this data and make it into a story to present to my leaders to, really show the impact of what we're doing. Now it's like you can take that data, you can pop that into whatever AI tool that you have, and using your right prompts, you can get, pick out the right kind of data that's going to be important to a leadership person in this kind of role who's really focused on this, and it's going to spit that out and give you that. So instead of having to spend like 4 hours on creating that report, now you can do that in 20 minutes, right? So now with all that time saved, now you can go over and be like, okay, so I know that my audience really loves this kind of content, so I'm going to focus on how am I going to get more of that content to then help increase.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think there maybe would be an opportunity too to leverage AI to simplify the tool stack. Because sometimes, I mean, I work with people in a lot of different roles where they've got a lot of different techs, like tech software tools that they're working with, and those all have subscription fees. So if there's a way that you can kind of integrate a few and then leverage AI and get rid of some others, that would save you some money. And hopefully the goal would also be simplify the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I love that you raised the kind of informal learning, because I think a lot of people get hung up on, you have to get certified in something and take formal education. But I personally am a huge fan of the School of YouTube. There are so many fantastic tutorials on there, and you can get access to so much information for free. So, I mean, that's another resource you can use, or just try playing around in your spare time if you have it. I know that not everyone has a lot of extra time that they can dedicate to this kind of thing. But if you can carve out, even if it was like 15 minutes a day to do some micro learning or little mini experimentations to help you feel like you're adapting and kind of keeping up with what's going on. Because the minute that you are in a work scenario and you refuse to touch something because you don't understand it, that's when your job is going to become at risk. Now, I know a lot of you aren't going to like to hear that, but unfortunately, that's the reality right now, right? You have to be willing to learn new skills and change the way that you've been doing things for the last decade or more.
Yeah.
And think of it as a growth opportunity, right? Like, maybe it will make your life easier. And then I think the other thing about future-proofing your career is to become a change champion, right? So once you've learned these new skills, then you can insulate yourself even more because you can influence others to adapt them, which there's always pushback, right? So if you can become somebody that's, it's not like from the top down being forced upon you. You're somebody who's on the team. These are your colleagues. You have a good rapport with these people. And so if you can show them how it's made your life easier in some way, and hey, it could make your life easier too, now you become that change champion. And even joining committees or creating some kind of working group or committee to examine the ways that these tools can be meaningfully implemented, that's a great idea too. And you don't have to have it, it doesn't necessarily have to be a committee that's been created already. Like, you can start the committee, put the idea forward so that, you're on the forefront of the trends, right? And the changes.
So then just to backtrack for a second there. So when we're thinking about the AI skills that we should be learning in the workplace, right? I think a good place to start is going to looking at your organization where you are and what are the expectations from your employer. Where if they're trying to build AI fluency across the board, then just start with that. Start with the few key ways that they are hoping and expecting employees to adopt and embrace AI. Because I think that so many of us feel, I mean, I certainly feel this way. So many of us feel that like all of a sudden, like, oh my God, I have to be an expert in AI and I can't, like, what am I doing? It's just that notion of like, you know what? I don't have to know how to use like all the 15 things out there that's going to make my job like, ooh, I'm done. But rather it's simply like knowing, okay, well, how am I going to use, whether it's Copilot or whether it's Gemini, how am I going to use those tools in my job? How am I going to, when I look at like my rhythm of business work, how can I say, well, how can I use these simple tools that my organization is paying for me to use? How can I use them on one task this week, right? Just like starting off really baseline and really easy for yourself, because even if you're just using that, you're still doing something. You're still building the skill. You're still building the habit of being like, okay, so instead of me spending, my 5 hours today doing my research on brand sentiment, and having to be like, oh, what does this mean? And using all my amazing critical thinking skills, or like popping that into whatever platform and getting an analysis made, and then making sure that then I'm going to spend time and I'm going to read through that analysis that's generated and making sure that it's on the mark. Because as we know, AI can be, what is it? AI hallucination.
It hallucinates information.
Yeah, I love that. The first time I read, oh, here's an AI hallucination, I was like, what world are we in?
Yeah. Definitely I'll cross-reference your AI work before you submit it.
Exactly. But just like starting off really small, because it can be very scary. It's very interesting to some people and it's very scary to lots of other people. But if you could take that small step, you're so much farther ahead than the people who are not, right?
Yeah.
So build up that comfort, build up that muscle with AI, and take those steps to get yourself there, so that suddenly you're like, you know what, I do want to spend my 15 minutes a day or spend my half an hour a week where I'm doing that informal learning, or all of those pieces, just to bring you to that level that you hope that you can be at.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Just kind of raising your general awareness first and then taking those baby steps so it's less intimidating.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times when it comes to tech, especially, if you don't consider yourself a tech savvy person, it can be very intimidating.
Right. And I think like if we take this out of the corporate environment, and let's even say McDonald's or Tim Hortons or somewhere where things as simple as like now as a customer, you're going in and you're putting in your order onto the screen yourself, which I hate. But still, right? If you're the person that's working at McDonald's, that's a computer taking over a portion of your role. So then if you're thinking, well, how do I save my job from this? Then it's thinking about what's the thing that you can do that screen isn't able to do. And that's the conversation. That's showing the empathy and the understanding for your customer. So when you have someone that's coming to the counter and they want to have that experience with you, like provide that experience. Make sure that they're getting that need filled of the human interaction that they want, right?
Yeah, but I think it's also important to look at the flip side of the scenario where some people are getting so fixated and caught up in all the AI tools and, oh, this is so neat, it saves me so much time, it's so efficient, that they lose some of those other, like you said, critical thinking skills, or perhaps even ability to communicate effectively with other people, whether that be through written content or, face-to-face verbally. How do you think people can try to leverage the AI tools while still flexing those other muscles, or using different parts of their brain so that they're not over relying on AI?
I think it's to me it comes down to still the people interaction, right? So then how are you, the work that you've done, whether you're doing it yourself or with AI, how are you taking that and sharing it with your peers? How are you sharing it with your leaders? How are you sharing it with those cross-functional partners?
Right.
And helping them to then get the pieces that they need to move forward, right? Because
Right.
AI is not going to do that for you. I mean, AI might write the email for you.
Yeah.
To be like, please look at this fancy presentation. But right. So it's the like, what can't AI do for you? And that's the people interaction in your job. We all have that component of
Right.
how are we taking what we've done and how are we then sharing the story of what we've done to the people that need to know.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. I also had a conversation with somebody who is in the tech space, and I was kind of dishing with him and saying how I hate this term AI first, and all these companies that aren't explicitly in the AI space are saying we're an AI first company. Like, it's across the board, it's in all these different industries, and I'm like, what does that mean? Okay, so if I'm an employee and I hear AI first, I'm immediately feeling threatened that means, I'm potentially on the cutting board.
Mhm.
And then as a customer, I'm immediately like, oh, well, this means that the service is going to be totally degraded, and, I'm not going to actually get to talk to a real human. So there's a perception that I have of that is negative. However, he was like, oh, well, that's not really what they mean when they say AI first. His take on it was that AI first just means if you are struggling with some kind of idea or concept or whatever, you just want to get the juices flowing, take it to AI first to try to like put together kind of a scaffolding, right?
Mm-hmm.
A structure to help you, you know, um, bounce off those initial ideas. So I think that's potentially a great framework that people could use is, okay, let's kind of throw some things into AI, see what it spits out, take that to a team, disconnect for a few minutes, and like actually work through it together and see what we can come up with when it comes to like problem solving or maybe content creation or whatever the case might be. If you rely explicitly on the AI, people know, right? It doesn't sound like you.
Exactly. And I think what you just said there, like it comes down to your perception of what that means, right? AI first. And I love that explanation that he gave to you.
Yeah.
Right. And when I think about in my job, that is the approach that I take. When I'm stumped on something, okay, then I'm going to go to AI.
Right.
I'm going to put in my questions and be like, oh, help me build a framework for this, or what kinds of questions, like, just get it to get me thinking, and then taking that and bringing it over bring it over to the people and have the conversation about it.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're interested in being part of an episode of Careers Unfiltered, you can head to brightsidecareers.ca/podcast. There's a short form where you can share a question, career dilemma, or topic you'd like us to explore. And let us know if you'd be open to a future call-in conversation. We're looking forward to hearing from you.